Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. So I am also going, like Mr. Ryan, I'm going to concentrate just on 2774 and 2796, which are the two big bills and are very similar. And I will start by expanding a little on Mr. Ryan's point about who the police officers respond to. And the language in these bills is a little vague and inconsistent about who the police officers report to. But in some cases, they say they may be partly hired by the district, or that they may be under the authority of the police department, but with the district having approval rights. But none of that really goes far enough. I will give you a story of what happened to give you some perspective on this. In New York City, there was a case where there was a school resource officer who was arresting a student, and the school principal said, no, don't take the student out that entrance, take the student out the side entrance. And the school resource officer didn't like that. The principal tried to say, no, it's got to be out the side entrance, and the school resource officer ended up arresting the principal. That's the problem is that what that illustrates is when you have police officers, they want to be the authority on the scene. They're not very good at seeing civilian as who are not on the force as overruling them when it comes to how they make arrests and how they handle arrests. If somebody is doing what they perceive as giving them trouble, then they may end up arresting that person. So it is hard to get school resource officers to respect the authority of the principal, even if officially the school district has a role in hiring them. So that's one example of what can happen. I want to also mention, since finances have been a concern here, one thing that both these two bills say is that they encourage retired police officers to be hired as school resource officers, and they're hired as school resource officers for pay, but when they're paid as school resource officers, that doesn't diminish their pension. So basically, they're double dipping. They get the same amount of pension as before, but they are also paid on top of that for being a school resource officer. So there's obviously financial concerns there. And even though it's encouraging retired police officers to be school resource officers, I don't see a lot of enough language in here and checking into exactly why this police officer retired or has been retired, which I would want to be careful about when somebody is interacting with students. So those are some concerns. Now, I know some of the students who are directly affected have been speaking about this. I'm sure they'll have more eloquent things to say about it than I do. But let me just try to put this in perspective with one more comparison here. I do think that if you ask me, do police officers play a role in people keeping us safe? And I would say yes. If you ask me if the troops in our military play a role in keeping us safe, I would say yeah, definitely. But I would not think it's a good idea to have our military in charge of patrolling our streets, because they are trained to do one specific kind of job, and they are the kind of job that they are trained to do doesn't put them in the right frame of mind to patrol our streets and keep and deal with civilians here and keeping our civilians safe. And it's kind of the same situation with police and schools. They are trained to do police are trained to do one particular kind of thing in dealing with criminals. Then you may have concerns about how they're trained, but they are trained to do that one particular kind of thing in dealing with criminals and people who may be very dangerous to the general population. But if you put them into schools, that's a situation that their training doesn't suit them for necessarily. They do tend to arrest people and be a little more forceful sometimes than they should. Not all police, but some do, as we saw in Tolman High and many other places around the country. That you can just go through YouTube and see a lot of examples. But I think we have to respect the fact that people have different kinds of trainings for different environments, and just like it wouldn't make sense to have our military as valuable as the job they do on our streets, it doesn't make sense to have people who've received police training and are trained to react like police in our schools in situations where they're likely to arrest students. And I think we should be aware of how school resource officers have sometimes been a problem, and we should be working on trying to improve that situation instead of hiring more school resource officers without really changing things. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Any questions for, yes, Senator Palmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment. I think, Randall, I think it's inappropriate for you to lump all police officers into the bucket of unable to work in a school environment. I've seen them work in a school environment. I'm not saying there aren't going to be issues, but you can't compare military, you can't compare police officers. To do it unilaterally or with one big paintbrush, I think is inappropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks. And just to very briefly respond, I tried to say that there may be issues with some police officers and not others. Maybe I wasn't clear enough about that. I tried to address that, but I do believe in respecting the fact that some training is for some environments and other training is for other environments. Thank you.
And